So for us, for the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition, the next gear for us was a rather large one. It ended up being a rather large one. It was foundations, and this was a specifically private foundations that we have here in Kansas. Every state has them. There are private foundations on community levels, within cities, within regions, private foundations within entire states, and of course on the national level. I mean, we can all think of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and also the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So you get the idea that they come in all different shapes and sizes. But for us, our story with foundations begins in 2011. And you'll see that's when we received our first foundation grant. Those of you who went to Coalition's conferences from the USBC back in 2014 may recall a presentation that I did with this foundation, and it was called the Best No Ever, because back in 2010, we actually submitted a grant proposal to this foundation, and they said no. But they came back with a question and said, tell us more about breastfeeding. So between 2010 and 2011, we had that conversation. We had multiple meetings, and this foundation recognized that there was a chance to leverage something that we had already started. So this foundation who helped us to really get our start is the United Methodist Health Ministry Fund. And they are fairly unique to Kansas. I don't think that you're going to have one in your backyard or in your state, but it's an example of a health foundation. And in 2011, they helped us to expand and enhance the business case for breastfeeding. We were one of the 30-some states that received a $10,000 grant from HRSA back in the day. You may remember in 2008 and 2009 that they selected states to do a train the trainer for the business case for breastfeeding. This was the green box that was that Kathy Carruthers and HRSA went around the country and trained us in. So we had that experience already. So we had already been trained in the business case. And the United Methodist Health Ministry Fund said, you know, here is a pre-packaged program, one that you've been trained to do, one that is evidence-based. Let's continue it. So they gave us our very first grant, and it was specifically for the business case for breastfeeding. Then over the years, they've allowed us to use some of that funding for our child care provider piece, recognizing that child care provider support for breastfeeding is an integral part of success for returning to the workplace. So that was kind of an offshoot of the business case for breastfeeding. So they did fund that indirectly. And some of you from Indiana, if Tina Cardarelli's on the phone, will recognize the lovely logo that they were so generous to allow us to use and expand their curriculum from the Indiana Perinatal Network. In 2011, this United Methodist Health Ministry Fund also started the High Five for Mom and Baby. Now, that did not go through our state coalition. It is completely self-administered by the fund, but we are an advisory entity to that. So they self-administer that program, but they rely on us for a lot of the technical and the content-specific help. They also, over a 2-year period, provided small grants to the breastfeeding field in Kansas through impact funding model. And these were small $3,000 grants that were given out over a period of 2 years. The Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition received one of those that helped us to support our local breastfeeding coalitions. And then this fund also went on to give grants to 4 other organizations in our state of Kansas to help with breastfeeding. And you're going to hear from one of them in a little while when Melissa Huddleston talks, because they were one of those grantees. So we also have another foundation here in Kansas, kind of a sister foundation, if you will, to the first one, and that's the Kansas Health Foundation. And they started the next year in their support of the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition. In 2012, they helped us to start the program we called Building Local Breastfeeding Coalitions. And at the time in 2012, we had only 8 coalitions. And you can see this map, which was current as of yesterday, is we now have coalitions covering over 60% of our state. I believe we have almost 30 coalitions, either regional or county level. And that is because the Kansas Health Foundation and gave us funding to establish this program, which allows us to give specific help. Sometimes that's me driving out to these coalitions, helping them to start up with their meetings, helping them to facilitate their meetings, giving them project ideas, and so forth. So it's really allowing us to have capacity to support our local coalitions. They also have given us funding for 2 years to create this designation called the Community Supporting Breastfeeding Designation. This is a community level designation recognizing communities that have a multifaceted support approach to breastfeeding support across 6 sectors. And if you want to know more about that designation, you can go to our website, which I'll show you at the end. But I don't want to go into the projects as much as I want to talk about the funders' relationship to the project. So the Kansas Health Foundation in 2014 and 2015 supported this project. And they too went on, like their sister foundation, to give grants to 4 other organizations across our state as well. So they clearly are one of our largest supporters for breastfeeding and a large player in the breastfeeding field here in Kansas. And we benefited from that. We also benefited from a relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation of Kansas. They were, again, another funder for the Building Local Breastfeeding Coalitions projects. I think that you'll see that there are multiple, I need to go back. There are multiple funders for a single project. Remember, the Kansas Health Foundation started this project in 2012, and the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation picked it up in 2013. Kind of took a year off, and then they funded it again in 2015. So we have these projects, and we oftentimes can present them to funders to say, this now has a track record. This has momentum behind it. This is what we've been able to accomplish, and this is how much it's cost so far. And we have even bigger ideas to do even more. So you'll see the same project maybe coming up multiple times, but in relationship to a different funder. So here is our future funders that we have, that we're in conversations with. These have all been identified through a variety of ways. And maybe like you, sometimes you stumble upon a funder. And that was kind of the case with the first one, Prime Health Foundation. It was somebody in the Kansas City area that simply emailed me and told me, hey, this might be something you're interested in. So that was just something that landed in my inbox. The Downing Family Foundation is a regional foundation that covers a quarter of our state. A quarter of our state. And that came up in a conversation with somebody out in Western Kansas. They said, this family foundation is very civic-minded and they give out quite a bit of money in this area, so you should investigate that. So we are putting together a proposal for that. And the same thing with the Dane G. Hansen Foundation as well. So my point with this slide is that you never know where the next suggestion for a funder might be. All of these were resulting from conversations that I had with somebody who then later thought of me when they saw this foundation. They thought of the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition when they received that RFP, and they just thought to forward it to me. So I go back to networking and relationships, because that's really, you never know where that's going to lead, a conversation or an email thread that will send an RFP your way. So I think that's important. If you would like to be a bit more aggressive and not just sit back and wait for RFPs to arrive in your inbox, I suggest that you connect with the Foundation Center. This is a nationwide center that is a database of foundations and their RFPs. And the U.S. Breastfeeding Committee has a membership to this. So you can email them directly if you're a state coalition, and they will give you the magic keys to the Foundation Center that will get you connected and get you access to this database. I really encourage you to do this because you can also sign up for their newsletter. And so almost on a weekly basis, you can, I think I selected health, and then I get on a weekly basis all of the RFPs that have been released with a health topic to them, a health emphasis. And I can quickly scroll through those and see which ones might apply. And I've even been surprised that some that are specific to Kansas have been announced on the Foundation Center. And maybe, hopefully it wasn't the first time I saw it, but sometimes it is. So I encourage you to connect to the Foundation Center, get on their newsletter so that you can get when the RFPs come out, you'll be notified through their weekly email. And I think that's really helpful. So I encourage you to go through the USBC so that they can give you access to that.